Airports are places of movement, where people arrive and depart every hour of the day. They are designed for transition, not for staying. Yet, in the late 20th century, one man turned an airport terminal into his home. His name was Mehran Karimi Nasseri, and his story would become one of the strangest real-life situations ever recorded. He arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris with the intention of traveling like any other passenger. But due to a series of complicated legal issues, he was unable to leave. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and eventually into years. What began as a temporary delay became something far more unusual. At first, Nasseri believed the situation would be resolved quickly. He expected that authorities would correct the issue and allow him to continue his journey. But the problem was more complex than he realized. Without valid documentation, he could not legally enter France. At the same time, he could not return to the country he had come from. This left him trapped in a legal and physical limbo. The airport became the only place where he was allowed to remain. With no other options, he stayed. Each day followed the same routine, as he waited for a solution that never seemed to come. As time passed, the airport continued to function around him. Flights arrived and departed, passengers moved through the terminal, and announcements echoed through the halls. For everyone else, the airport was a temporary stop. For Nasseri, it became a permanent environment. He watched thousands of travelers pass by, each one moving forward while he remained in the same place. The contrast between constant motion and complete stillness created a strange reality. The airport was always changing, yet his life within it remained exactly the same. Over time, Nasseri began to adapt to his new environment. He arranged his belongings around a specific area of the terminal, turning a simple bench into a living space. He kept his documents, bags, and personal items carefully organized. What started as a temporary setup gradually became something more permanent. Airport staff and regular visitors began to recognize him. He was no longer just another passenger. He became part of the environment itself, a constant presence in a place defined by movement. Airport authorities were aware of his situation, but there was little they could do. His case existed in a legal gray area that made it difficult to resolve. He was not breaking any laws by staying in the terminal, yet he could not legally leave. This unusual situation left officials with limited options. Instead of forcing him out, they allowed him to remain. Over time, his presence became accepted. What once seemed temporary slowly became normal. As the days turned into months, Nasseri developed a routine that helped him adapt to his unusual situation. He spent much of his time sitting in the terminal, observing the constant flow of travelers passing by. He ate simple meals from airport vendors and carefully managed his limited resources. Despite the unusual circumstances, he tried to maintain a sense of normality. The airport became a world of its own, filled with sounds, movement, and patterns that repeated daily. Yet for Nasseri, each day felt almost identical. Time seemed to move forward for everyone else, but for him it stood still. Passengers rushed past him, their lives moving forward with purpose and direction. Some noticed him, while others walked by without a second glance. The contrast between movement and stillness became more noticeable over time. Nasseri remained in the same place, watching as thousands of strangers came and went. Each person had a destination, a reason to move forward. He, however, remained suspended in a moment that never seemed to end. This constant contrast created a sense of isolation that grew stronger with each passing day. Over time, some airport staff began to interact with him. They would occasionally stop to talk, offering small gestures of kindness. These interactions became an important part of his daily life. They provided moments of human connection in an otherwise repetitive environment. Despite his situation, Nasseri remained calm and composed. He accepted his circumstances with a level of patience that surprised many people. His ability to adapt to such an unusual lifestyle made his story even more remarkable. To pass the time, Nasseri began writing. He recorded his thoughts, experiences, and observations in notebooks. Writing gave him a sense of purpose and structure. It allowed him to process his situation and maintain a connection to reality. His notes became a reflection of his life inside the terminal, capturing the details of a world that most people would never experience. Through writing, he created a record of his existence, turning his unusual circumstances into something meaningful. At night, the airport became quieter. The crowds thinned and the constant movement slowed. Lights remained on, but the atmosphere changed. It became calmer, almost peaceful. For Nasseri, these moments offered a different experience. The silence allowed him to reflect on his situation without distraction. Yet even in these quieter hours, the reality remained the same. He was still there, unable to leave, waiting for something that might never happen. The departure boards continued to update, displaying flights to destinations around the world. Each change represented movement, opportunity, and possibility. For Nasseri, these destinations were out of reach. He could see them, read about them, but he could not go to them. The constant display of travel possibilities became a reminder of his situation. It was a visual representation of everything he could not access. As time passed, Nasseri became more reflective. Watching people move through the airport gave him insight into human behavior. He observed their routines, emotions, and interactions. Each traveler had a story, purpose, a destination. In contrast, his own story remained unchanged. This observation created a deeper understanding of his situation. He was not just physically confined, he was separated from the normal flow of life. Even as the airport staff carried out their daily routines, Nasseri remained a constant presence. Cleaning crews worked around him, security staff passed by, and operations continued as usual. His presence became part of the environment, something that no longer stood out. Over time, he was no longer seen as unusual, but simply as part of the terminal itself. Sleeping in the airport became another part of his routine. He rested on benches, surrounded by his belongings. The constant noise and light made it difficult, but he adapted. Over time, even this became normal. His ability to adjust to these conditions demonstrated a level of resilience that few people could imagine. Watching planes take off became a daily experience. Each departure represented movement and freedom. For Nasseri, it was a reminder of what he could not do. The sight of planes leaving the runway created a contrast between possibility and limitation. During the day, the airport was filled with activity. The noise, movement, and energy created a sense of life. Yet within this environment, Nasseri remained still. The contrast between his stillness and the activity around him highlighted the uniqueness of his situation. His belongings became symbols of his situation. The same items remained with him day after day, representing both his identity and his limitation. They were reminders of where he came from and why he was unable to leave. As the sun set, the light inside the terminal changed. The atmosphere became calmer, offering a brief moment of peace. For Nasseri, these moments were rare but meaningful. They provided a sense of balance within an otherwise unchanging routine. Late at night, the airport corridors became empty. The silence returned and the space felt different. These moments, the scale of the terminal became more noticeable. It felt larger, more isolated, and more distant. The image of one person sitting alone among countless empty seats captured the essence of his experience. It represented isolation within a place designed for connection and movement. As years passed, the environment remained the same. The terminal continued to function unchanged, while his life remained fixed in place. Time moved forward, but his situation did not. 18 years passed before his situation finally changed. But for a long time, the airport was his world. A place of movement that became a place of stillness. And a reminder that sometimes being unable to leave can be more powerful than being unable to arrive. After many years of living inside the terminal, Nasseri's situation slowly began to attract global attention. Journalists, travelers, and even filmmakers became interested in his story. What once seemed like a forgotten case turned into an international phenomenon. People from different parts of the world came to see him, to speak with him, or simply to observe the man who had turned an airport into his home. Despite the attention, his daily routine remained largely unchanged. He continued to sit in the same area, surrounded by his belongings, watching the world move around him. The attention brought recognition, but it did not change the reality of his situation. As media coverage increased, his story began to symbolize something deeper than just a legal issue. It became a reflection of identity, belonging, and the complexities of international law. Nasseri was not simply stuck in a place. He existed in a space between nations where normal rules did not apply. His situation raised questions about borders, citizenship, and what it truly means to have a home. For many observers, his story was both fascinating and unsettling. It showed how a single problem with documentation could transform a person's entire life in ways no one could have predicted. Over time, Nasseri adapted so completely to his environment that leaving the airport became an unfamiliar idea. The terminal was no longer just a place where he stayed. It had become his entire world. The routines, the sounds, the constant flow of people all formed a structure that he understood. Outside the airport, everything was uncertain. Inside, everything was predictable. This shift in perspective made the situation even more complex. What had once been a temporary problem had evolved into a long-term reality that was difficult to reverse. Eventually, legal solutions began to appear. Authorities worked to resolve the issues that had kept him confined for so long. Documents were prepared, permissions were granted, and the possibility of leaving the airport became real. After nearly 2 decades, Nasseri finally had the opportunity to step outside and begin a new chapter of his life. But after so many years in the same environment, the idea of change was not as simple as it seemed. The transition from isolation to freedom carried its own challenges. When he finally left the airport, the moment was both significant and surreal. For years, the terminal had defined his existence. Stepping outside meant entering a world that had continued without him. Technology had advanced, society had changed, and time had moved forward. Adjusting to this new reality required more than just physical movement. It required a complete shift in perspective. The world beyond the airport was no longer the same as the one he had known before. Today, the story of Mehran Karimi Nasseri remains one of the most unusual real-life situations ever recorded. It is not just a story about being trapped in a place, but about how circumstances can reshape a person's identity and perception of the world. His experience serves as a reminder that freedom is not always as simple as leaving a location. Sometimes, the boundaries that define us are not physical, psychological. And in a place designed for movement, one man showed what it truly means to remain still.